Okay, welcome back. We have the final block of discussion for the afternoon up ahead of us for the next 3/4 of an hour. We're carrying on with the universal standards, including the human rights related standards. So yet more recommendations and discussion topics to come out of that. I think we've got a new set of slides in front of us now. We're into management approach now, aren't we? Yes. Okay, right. We rally for the next 45 minutes, everyone. Laura, please lead on.
Sure. So now we're looking at item 9, which includes our recommended revisions to GRI 103, the management approach standard. So our recommended revisions aim primarily to incorporate the concept of due diligence into GRI 103 in line with the recommendations of our technical committee, and also based on the discussions we had during the last session, we're looking to focus 103 on the management of negative impacts, which is also in line with the expectation of due diligence, and also to revise the concept and requirements of topic boundary. In addition, we have made other recommended revisions to 103 based on stakeholder feedback around the relevance and the clarity of the existing management approach disclosures. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to walk you through the 3 revised disclosures that we are proposing. I'll explain where the contents come from and what are the key changes compared to the existing version of 103. So the first proposed disclosure looks at policies and commitments, and specifically it asks for the policies and procedures in place for the topic and any commitments, goals, and targets in place. These contents come from the existing disclosure 103.2 C on the management approach components. So if you look at the list of existing items, we have retained information on policies, commitments, goals and targets, and we have additionally added information on procedures based on stakeholder feedback. Then we are proposing to move to guidance information on responsibilities and resources based on feedback that these are not essential to report for every material topic, and also because information on responsibilities is already covered by the governance disclosures. And finally, we're proposing to move the component around grievance mechanisms to GRI 102, the general disclosures, with some revisions proposed by our technical committee. And we will look at those tomorrow morning when we look at the general disclosures. Next is disclosure 103.2, which looks at the actions to prevent, mitigate, and remediate impacts. So first, this would include a description of the actual and potential negative impacts identified and the involvement with those impacts. And this would replace the existing disclosure 103.1 on the explanation of the material topic and its boundary, as we explained in the previous session. Then the rest of the disclosure would look at the actions taken to prevent and to address negative impacts, and at how stakeholder engagement has informed the actions taken. And all of these would replace the remainder of disclosure 103.2 on the management approach and its components. And the last disclosure, 103.3, replaces the existing disclosure on the evaluation of the management approach. It would now require how the effectiveness of the actions taken is tracked, including any processes or indicators used to evaluate progress, evidence that the actions have been effective, how stakeholder engagement has informed how the effectiveness is tracked, and key lessons learned and how these have been incorporated into operational policies and procedures. So these changes aim, first of all, to align more closely with the expectation of due diligence, but also to provide more clarity as to what needs to be reported with regards to the evaluation of the management approach. which was one of the feedbacks we received through the survey. So this is the overview of the disclosures. As said before, we have received specific comments on the wording of the disclosures, which we will aim to address offline. The one substantive comment we have received ahead of the meeting is on the last disclosure on tracking effectiveness. And the question was whether we could simplify this even further. Based on stakeholder feedback, that this is at the moment quite challenging for companies to report.
Okay, discussion. I'll open up the discussion on these three. I'm going to open it with a question that occurred to me this morning, which is, do we have anywhere in the existing standards, in the glossaries or keyword lists, do we have a definition of policy any place? And I ask this because at a practical level, there's an awful lot of variation as to what companies may label as a policy, and not really a very clear idea of what what characteristics it needs to have in order to call something a policy as opposed to something else, a management document or something. Is there any such thing?
We don't have a formal definition of policy.
We did do as part of the management approach work a couple of years ago, but also in various discussions with the expert groups, is we kept coming back to should we define it or not. And more often than not, people said, well, and actually it means all of the above. Policies could be all the things that you possibly have, whether that's actually written and signed off or whether it's implicit. And that's shown. We might have to look at this, whether we want to be more specific, but it is also in the, as you see here, it is also the combination of policies and procedures, which is procedures is equally all-encompassing. Yes. And for some, actually, they don't have policies, they only have procedures. Yes. So the question is how much we can win by defining it more narrowly and how much information we lose if then people stick to a definition. That's where we kept coming back to in past discussions.
Gustavo.
Yes, regarding that policy issue, yeah, it's great what you said. Sometimes we believe that in the companies, the non-written policy sometimes is a wish of one person or two or a sector. So it's not what the company think that it is. So I think it's great to have to define or to specify a written policy, assign that policy from the direction, the board, because when you talk in companies, there are thousands of policies, non-written policies, and you don't know who is saying that.
Robin.
I just wanted to follow up on something I think Corley raised earlier on about with the different proposed elements of these disclosures, and to what extent the current crop of topic-specific disclosures would either lend themselves or perhaps present challenges in terms of reporting on all the elements that are proposed in the new recommended disclosures. So I think there are some topics that that might be more problematic than others in the current list, and maybe they're for things that have to be reviewed in the work program over coming years anyway. But I think it's worth having a look in view of some of these requirements as well.
Gustavo, yeah.
Another small thing, in order about to simplification of the management approach, regarding that, the new standards like tax, safety, and water, they have each one a management approach disclosures. I believe that could be interesting to to short the three of one, and to have only one management approach to everyone, or one or two, I don't know, but in order to simplify all the disclosures.
Corley. Just a question, and apologies if I missed it earlier, but I note that responsibilities and resources have been moved to guidance. What is the implication of that, and is there a need to retain some reference to, for example, the level of seniority of oversight of a particular topic? I mean, given the fact that there is an expectation that issues like climate change and so on needs to have some level of high-level executive oversight or linkages. So how is it sufficient to deal with that in guidance, or is it dealt with within the topic specifically? I'm just wondering.
So with regards to the responsibilities, we cover that at the moment in the governance disclosures in the GRI 102. I don't know them by heart at the moment, but we do ask for information on executive and high-level responsibility for the material topics identified. So in a way, this content was duplicated at the moment. Yeah.
Rama.
A quick question on the stakeholder consultation. Will the guidance that will come, will it be like a generic guidance on principles, or will you be laying out the scope of the consultations? Because some of these, organizations, the stakeholder, especially the debate that we had earlier on the outward, it can be quite large. So will you be laying out some kind of the scope, or will you help define the scope?
Do you mean for the disclosures that deal with stakeholder engagement? Yeah, we have some guidance, not a lot of it, and a couple of examples. I think we won't be too prescriptive with regards to the scope of the engagement. I think that would be for companies to define, but there's certainly room for providing more guidance as to what we expect here exactly.
Laura, I think you may have received some feedback on this previously, or prior to this meeting, but it seems to me that there's two places in these three recommendations where the word any appears. And that word any is a little bit leaving the door open to something that we may or may not want. So in the first disclosure 1031, we have this point B: for each material topic, the reporting organization shall report any commitments, goals, and targets for the topic. And likewise, 1033A1, any processes or indicators used to evaluate progress. Is that something that you're looking at separately?
Yes, definitely. We have received that feedback, and in the next phase, we're going to go through all of the disclosures, also in the other universal standards, and look at taking out the word any, as it is causing a bit of confusion. Yeah.
Okay, in general, can I ask the GSSB whether this seems like a sensible revision to the management approach, a sort of, overall simplification of the management approach process and disclosures? And is there any further discussion? You may have broken the GSSB for this afternoon. But for that matter, it may simply be that the logic behind this is blindingly obvious and not in need of very much further discussion by the GSSB. If that's the case, it does sort of sound to me like it sounds as though there is agreement to the three recommendations. Are there some takeaways that and next steps that you would like to enumerate?
Sure. So what I've noted is maybe around policies, we need to clarify what we mean here, maybe not in the form of a definition, but in the form of guidance. We will also look at how these disclosures apply to the list of topic-specific standards to ensure that they make sense for all of the topics that we are offering at the moment. We will look as well at the grouping of the disclosures and see whether they can be consolidated into one or two. And we will look at removing the term any all throughout the disclosures. Yeah.
Evan.
And this feedback on 1033 about further, simplifying the standard because it is pretty confusing. Are you taking that to heart too? Are you going to revise this down even further, or do you feel like this is as far as we can go?
Well, if there are concrete suggestions for how to simplify this, then we're happy to look into those. So I think the feedback we got from the users on the existing version of this disclosure was twofold. One, that it is not clear what this is asking for, so I think now we're being much more specific as to what information we're looking for, so I think we have addressed that part. The other part about this being challenging, some of the rationales we saw from companies is not so much about the information we're asking, it's just that it is difficult to evaluate the management approach. So it had to do more with how to do that in practice than the reporting element of it. And based on the feedback we got from the users of the report, this is the more interesting information in a sustainability report, because this is where you see whether companies are making improvements. Linking this back again to the positive and negative discussion. So our recommendation would be to leave it as is. It's important to note that reasons for omission can be given for this disclosure. So if there are not systems in place to track the effectiveness, or there's nothing concrete to share yet, companies can say that. But I think we should encourage companies to provide this information where available.
Just as I'm looking that up on the screen, the word key might have a similar problem to the word any.
Thank you. Sorry, Evan, did you want to come back?
Just following up on Laura's point, does that mean we're going to look at the guidance for this in order to make it more intelligible for companies, given the context and the revision?
Sorry, can you repeat that point?
We're going to adjust the guidance for this disclosure now that we've, touched this language, and maybe use the guidance around the standard to make it more intelligible.
Yes. So for all this, for disclosures number 2 and 3, we have corresponding guidance that has been developed by the technical committee. So we will look to bring that into the standards and also share that with you for review.
Okay. If there's no need to sort of extend this conversation further, then I think we can probably conclude it a little bit earlier. We are starting again tomorrow with yet more universal standards discussion. That's absolutely fine. We've got items 10, 11, and 12 to go through tomorrow. Should I just do a quick kind of run through of what tomorrow looks like for everyone? First of all, I'd like to say we are going to lose Kirsten, are we not? Am I correct? And yes, and I think Vincent needs to leave us a bit early in the afternoon tomorrow. And okay, fine. Yes, there's several members, Evan and Loredana as well, who will need to leave us a bit earlier tomorrow. That is absolutely fine. What I want to say, like I said just a moment ago, we're going to, in the morning, we'll take a look at item 10 and 11 which is more, these are more proposals to come out of the Universal Standards Review. After lunch, we are going to have a private session, and what that's going to do is it's going to have an impact on when we open up the discussion around the GSSB work program, but we'll try to clarify what that timing means ahead of time for anybody who may be listening in. And then we also, towards the end of the afternoon, we have a proposal from the GRI Secretariat. This is item 12 that has to do with the process by which reports are registered with GRI. And please, if you can just come with any kind of thoughts that you have about those 3 items for tomorrow. Would anybody like to make any sort of comments or observations, or is there anything that we that you would like to register as a kind of AOB point, if need be, towards the end of the meeting? Kirsten.
I just wanted to say that I have reviewed the item 10 and 11 for tomorrow. Yeah. I support them. Very, very good documents, very, very good work, which I really think altogether that for this restructuring of the standards and the suggestions for standard disclosures, etc., I'm impressed about the quality of what was submitted to us before the meeting. I have a few comments. In the greater context, I would say they are minor comments, and Sarah Jane is well aware of them, and we have also been able to discuss through them. I was a bit worried when I heard about item 12, and suddenly realized that I have forgotten to read that one. But I'll try to find it, and I'll do my best to send my comments by tomorrow morning. Yeah, good.
Any others? Yeah, Corley.
This document that's in our pack, are we supposed to complete it, or what needs to be done?
Thank you for that. Yes, we have a document in here, the GSSB self-evaluation. We need to do a periodic self-evaluation form. What you have in here is well, it's sort of a survey, really, that asks you to reflect on how the GSSB works, how you contribute to it, and how your peers on the GSSB contribute to our work. That will be collated, and it's part of our own kind of attending to our own process that we need to do periodically. Specifically, what do we do with it? Can you remind me? Do we evaluate it and?
Well, this we consolidated and provided back to the GSB, and we can take this up as an agenda item if the GSB decides that this is a matter for discussion.
I might just say that I can share, at least informally anyway, the news that's been received today from the GRI nominating committee, which is that the members whose terms were up for renewal or up for reconsideration, renomination, they are Kent, Evan, Robin's term as vice chair, my term as chair, and there was one other, I can't remember what it was. Does anybody remember who else was? Julia. Julia has decided to step down from the GSSB at the end of this year. The other remaining members have been reappointed for another term. So that's Kent and Evan have been reappointed. Robin has been reappointed as vice chair. I've been reappointed as chair. Julia, there were some applications that were received. None was considered quite right for the vacancy, and therefore the nominating committee is going to extend the search and seek some more recommendations. Julia is a business member. We don't have a specific ratio of members that need to come from one constituency or another, but that may have an impact on sort of exactly what they're looking for. But I would like to just share with the rest of the members that they are still looking for another person to join our ranks next year. Kent.
I just
like to
wanted
make
to
a
know, is this announcement, would this fall in the category of positive information or negative information?
Okay, well, I think we can close our meeting a little bit early today and reconvene the public meeting as planned for 9 o'clock Amsterdam time tomorrow. Thank you very much.